so you can have a copy of the video as well. What I've done is I've decided to try this differently. I've been animating on a shot for the last week. I've gotten to the point to where my blocking pass is finished, and I've been recording every second of it. So what is in this folder is time-lapse videos of my entire process of getting to this point in the shot. So what I'm going to do is we're going to watch those while I explain to you what I'm thinking about, what are things to emphasize, and I think that this will get the information to you in a way that is clear without you having to watch a slower process, right? So I would ask you to chime in. Like if you have questions about how this works, this will be better. I had a couple of really good questions that from the last class that kind of spun off into different discussions. So I'm going to show you the video first. This is what I'm basing my animation off of. It's a YouTube clip. This kid, I'm forgetting his name right now. Let me tell you. It's anyway. I'll look him up here in a minute. So this kid has these YouTube videos where he does all of these different flips off the wall. This was one of the first ones, and I thought it was just kind of I thought I wanted to do something physical, right? I wanted to do some physical action that was impressive, and I wanted to, like I was talking about the personality and appeal. I wanted to have some personality and appeal to it. So I watched all 50 of them. This is actually the first one in the video, and I came back to it. And it has nothing to do with the rest of the flip. The reason I came back to it is the way it ends. Watch how he lands, and he does this jump back like, you ready to fight? Like he ends this almost like confrontationally, like he's like with a bravado, right? And I thought that was kind of neat. One, you rarely see a lot of videos of kids doing this kind of athleticism, but two, like he's just got so much personality at the end of that. I'm like, I want to amp that up. So I'm using the Kayla rig. You all will probably recognize her. Some of you recognize her too much. So, Megan worked with her for a while. It's a good rig. It's a $12 rig, I think, from Josh Sobel, but it's a really good rig. And so I'm going to use her as the character that I do this animation for. So you'll see what I'm talking about with that little arm thing he does at the end, right? That's kind of what I'm going for. So once I found this video, I found it on YouTube. I used some nefarious websites to download the video from YouTube. And then I needed to get my video reference into some usable format, right? So that's what this first video is. We already talked about this a little bit. That's the links that I put up on the network. I go in there, I trim it to where I want it, and then I export it out as a JPEG sequence, 24 frames per second. So what I will have at that point is one image for every frame of the animation. So flip, change it to 24 frames per second, export. Now I have all those images. Yay. So this is the process that I went through for that. From there, I've already done a little bit of setup in Maya. I will say that I had another video I recorded, and then I opened up Premiere, and Premiere locked my computer up, so I lost it. That video was me getting the rig in place and creating the environment. So you'll see that come in like completed. But once I have that image sequence, this is the scene. Once I have that image sequence, I need to get it into Maya to use it. So I'm just creating a plane in here that is the same shape, overall shape, as my image sequence. I'll bring in the first image as a texture file, and then I'll check that Use Image Sequence button there. And what that's going to do is it's going to tie the frames in my timeline to the frame on that image sequence. So if I'm on frame 24 in my timeline, that image in the background will be showing me image 24 from that image sequence. the cool part about that is that means I can scrub in one place and see my reference update and my animation update. I know a lot of people who kind of, even after I show them this, they don't use it. I'm not 100% sure why. I'm going to make a couple of guesses. One of those guesses is that people think it's copying, that you're cheating and like copying the reference. But it's not, because like you will end up with something completely different than what is in your reference, no matter how much you try to stick to it. But the other is they probably think that there's not enough advantage to going through these extra steps. This is probably the single most beneficial thing I've changed about my workflow in the past 7 years. Like this and a set of scripts that cost about $150 are the two biggest pieces of advice I could give to somebody who's already a good animator wanting to get better. And the reason for this is because I'm able to pick up nuance in this reference now that was almost too many clicks to pick up in the past, right? All I have to do now is click once and drag, and I see the reference update, and I see my animation update, and I start, like, I can disregard all of the clicks now and just use my eyes to pick up information, right? The same way you were assessing these drawings and finding information about the pose, my brain can be doing that in Maya, right? And so this is, like, by a large margin, has improved the quality of my animation working like this. So I really can't endorse it enough. Like, it is a really good way of working. It doesn't mean you have to, and if you still want to just do it as a video off to the side, I get that, but I strongly encourage you to consider this. So once I have that in there, I'm ready to start setting keyframes. Now, of course, we're using the post-to-post process. You'll notice kind of what I'm doing is I'm using that placement controller to get her off screen, right? That's the last time I will touch that placement controller. You don't want to move the entire character with that in your animation, because that moves every control, which pretty much destroys the entire point of IK, right? So what you're actually seeing me do here is figure out the rig. I had opened the rig before, I'd even done little test animations with it before, but I was not sure how I wanted to use it. And not all rigs are the same, so I'll kind of go back and show you little things I'm looking at. How does the spine work? I'm actually not super crazy about the spine, but the rest of it's pretty cool. I like my arms to be in FK and maintaining global orientation, which means if you change your spine's orientation, your arms stay in the same orientation. And I like the same with the head. I also did a couple of extra little things for like resizing the character and stuff like that. So when it comes to picking out your key poses, it starts with a run in this. So I know what a lot of people would first instinct to do is to go ahead and start getting your contact, you're down, you're passing, you're up. I kind of went for a different option because I didn't necessarily know how many steps I need her to take yet. Right? It's either going to be 2 or 3. What I did is I get my first key pose where she is on screen, because she's going to come from off screen onto screen, right? And then I get my first key pose where she leaves the ground. I'll figure out that run part in between. So when we talk about pose to pose, I'm going from storytelling pose to storytelling pose. If I were telling someone the story of this scene, I would say the little girl ran to the tree, she ran up the side of the tree, and turned to flip and landed on the ground, right? Each of those little notes are part of that storytelling pose. So I'm getting her running on the screen and then running up the tree. So those are going to be my first 2 key poses I work on. Now I want to kind of emphasize the fact that I am editing everything. Like, I'm editing every finger control. I'm editing, I start posing the face a little bit here. I know I said, you know, you probably shouldn't pick a character with a face. If you do, at least give her, or him or her, some form of face pose, so they're not like, like running zombie. Like they need some emotion on the face, even if you're not going to animate it that much. Now, here's an interesting thing that happened. I did it wrong. So when looking at my reference, I didn't realize that it should have been her left leg that goes up on the tree instead of her right leg. I was looking at that one frame. When I scrubbed my timeline, I kind of noticed the difference, so I had to make some changes. Notice a lot of what I'm looking at here, cleaning up that line of action, smoothing parts of the rig, and making sure my silhouette is clear. I really want that elbow kind of poking out there. Like, the more I look at this now, the more I think I may exaggerate that even more. And so every bit of this is me just trying to get these two poses as clean as I can. So I'm going to go back here a little bit to the end, show you a couple of things. One is, you'll notice I put this in stepped mode. So I'll come back to that in just a second, but I do want to talk about, sorry, let me go back just a little bit more. We're talking about posing the fingers, posing every element of this. The point of that is that I know a lot of times people think that that's tedious, right? And I think the reason they think it's tedious is they know animation is going to take a long time. They know it's going to take 40 hours to get this animation finished, right? I don't have time to worry about the fingers. I got to get this animation finished. And that shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be to get each pose finished. You can't get the animation finished until you get good poses. And if you rush past the poses, you're never going to get the animation finished. It'll eventually be something you throw away. So I think that the issue that I worry about there is that I'll come back to that. Anyway, so I will say, pose the hands, because if you pose the hands like in the first pose, then the next time your character changes the hand pose, you just have to make some adjustments. But instead, if you pose the entire character and leave the hands like these boat paddle hands, then at the end of your animation, the last thing you have to do is create 50 hand poses. And that's just something you're not going to want to do, right? It's not fun. So thinking of these as individual drawings, as individual finished pieces of your art is actually really helpful. And the reason for that is, like I said, this animation is going to take you, 20, 30, 40 hours. And if you wait for some form of positive feedback until the very end, that's just going to be a long 40 hours. What you should be doing is thinking of each pose as an accomplishment. Okay? If you do that, then what I've gotten already here, and I think this is about 34 minutes of work, I have two accomplishments. I have two strong poses that I can use for this animation. And they are successful in their own right. And they can be critiqued in their own right. And that will give you a feedback loop of positive feedback that keeps you moving forward, right? If you're like, in 40 hours, I'll be able to be happy, versus in 5 minutes, I can be happy with this pose, it will help you make that longer animation more accomplishable. So the reason I put this in step mode is so I can just focus on the poses. And I'll show you why that's important here in a few minutes. So the next keyframes I decided to work on was getting this flip underway. Instead of going back and working on too much of the detail of the run, I was just going to try to push myself to the end of the animation. A lot of times, if it's a simple shot, I will do my first keyframe and my last keyframe as my first two poses. In this case, I'm kind of doing it from beat to beat. I'm going from the left side of the screen, the right side of the screen to the tree, and then the tree to the flip, right? And that's kind of my progress through there. So I'm getting the poses in here that help me define that flip. So she kind of has to get up onto the tree with both feet. There's actually a pose where she turns around and faces the other way, but instead of going straight to that, I just try to get her back down onto the ground into the landing pose next. So it takes a little bit of maneuvering, and she's going to look broken for a long time, right? But eventually I'll start getting her back down there. Again, I'm looking at every part of this. Why is this why is that image of that little kid in the background, why is it communicating as him landing? Like, what information can I pull from that I can use in my animation? Now, you see this when I'm scrubbing, you see how all of that looks broken? That's why I put it in step mode, is because I need to be able to ignore that at this point, right? That is not for current Greg to worry about. Present Greg has things to worry about that are not those issues. That's for future Greg. He solves all of my problems, right? And that's, I say that I kind of in jest, but like, that is not the problem at hand right now. The problem at hand is crafting strong poses. And if I get distracted by those in-betweens that are not working, then like it's just going to take me off of the actual task that is going to get me to a successful animation, which is making these strong poses. Little things to notice is I'm still trying to get as clear of a silhouette as I can on everything, and I'm animating every portion for every point of the character. So you see that weird flip that she's getting there? I just want to ignore that. So I'll open up my outliner here in a second, or my graph editor here in a second, and I'll set it to step mode. Little things that I would have never caught, I'm picking up from the reference though. So there's a couple of things in here that I just would not have guessed if I wouldn't have used reference, which is when he hits the ground, his feet are in one place, and then as he squashes down, his feet slide forward, right? Like, that makes sense because he has that forward momentum, but I probably just would have pinned the feet to the ground, and I work a long time later on here to make that clear. So I'm just pulling things from the reference to try to make this work. Now, I want to show you right here, where I was just at, right here. In a second here, I start sort of stepping back and forth. I'm using the greater than, less than keys to step from keyframe to keyframe, right? So instead of scrubbing, I'm using greater than and less than. And that means I can evaluate the change from pose A to pose B, right? And in a second, I become really concerned about the arc that she takes, or the path that she takes. Is she going far enough forward? And is she in the right orientation when she's in air, right? If I'm not worrying about that now, then in the end, she may do a flip where she actually slides over and then comes back. And that's just going to be harder to fix in the end. So the greater than, less than keys that you step through these keyframes and evaluate their relation to each other, evaluate why that will eventually communicate correctly. So at this point, it's looped again. At this point, I play blasted it just to see what it would look like. I also realized you're watching this in, like, literally I've sped this up by 1,000%. And so I realized you probably aren't seeing the animation. I thought you might want to see what it looked like at this point. So this is a play blast of this animation that I have up to that point, right? Still some stuff missing. Got that squash at the end and the pop back up, right? But those are the keyframes that I have just in that play blast. And this is them in step mode, so the only thing I see are the key poses. And again, I'll reiterate, I'm setting keyframes on every single control. Like, there are literally keyframes, or there are literally controls that control the shape of her eyelid, and I'm setting keyframes on every one of those every time I hit a keyframe. Everything, because you don't know what future problems you're going to run into. And keyframes are cheap. Like, we can delete them later if it really bothers you, but now we can know that everything is exactly under our control. And if I change something on one keyframe, it's not going to mess something up on another one, right? Everything is nailed down. Now the reason again that I'm doing this in stepped mode is because this is what it looks like in stepped mode. This is what it would look like if it were in auto tangent. Doesn't feel as gratifying, does it? So I can look at that play blast in step mode and feel like I've accomplished something. And that may sound like self-serving, or that may sound unimportant, like you're supposed to suffer for your art or whatever. Like, screw that. No, I'm doing this because I enjoy it. And if I can't see results from my hard work, it's going to be harder to put hard work into it, right? And so in step mode, I am able to see the accomplishments, and I'm able to see the successes without being distracted by all this garbage that's messed up, right? That's actually easy to fix. I will show you how to fix that. Like, I can fix the stuff that looks bad about the flip in under 15 seconds. But if you're worrying about it now, you're not worrying about the key poses, which are the important parts at this point. Again, I think I use the phrase a lot, like, trust the process. And if you're trusting the process and this looks good to you, or this looks like it's communicating what you want it to communicate, we can eventually make the final animation communicate what you want it to communicate too. But this is the foundation of it, right? So, from there, I recognize that part of the reason that flip is messing up is because I don't have enough information in the flip. There's a point where the character almost is like his back is like parallel to the ground, and I don't necessarily know, maybe it was a little bit of a gut instinct, maybe it just felt like the right spot to grab. That point seemed important. I think part of it is because it starts to feel like the point where he goes from being in a ball while he's twirling to straightening back out for the landing. And so I felt like I needed to document that with a keyframe. So that's what this key pose is here. I think it also refines the motion of that flip, makes it clear that this is a flip. When choosing your key poses, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to choose the poses that will communicate to a complete stranger who has no idea what you're working on that this is the action you're trying to achieve. Now, the reason this is an entire video just for this one pose. This one pose took me almost 30 minutes. And the reason is, as you see right now, like where her knees and hand is, it's a muddy mess, right? That's just an ugly silhouette. And so I'm going back and forth to looking at the reference to trying to come up with some pose solution that I can be happy with. My result was being able to show the knee. I'll show you again. Being able to show the knee clearly on the back leg, hiding her left arm a little bit more behind so it doesn't come in and mess up the silhouette, and then kind of creating this negative space in between her hand and, show you again there. Creating this negative space between her hand and that knee there in order to clear up the silhouette, right? So that was like, I mean, I'm sure like from the outside, somebody who is not an animator, they're like, why are you going through all that work? It's like, that's going to happen in a 24th of a second. But again, it's that 24th of a second is the part you feel, not the part you see. And if that's muddy, then that part of the animation will feel muddy and less effective. So like that I am not lamenting that 30 minutes I spent on that pose. It will save me multiple hours at the end of this when I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with it. Again, you see I'm kind of working a little bit in here too to make sure the character's trajectory is correct as she travels through the air there. And again, I'm using the greater than, less than keys to step through those. So, after I have that flip, I wanted to finish up to the end. So I kind of used this video to get all those key poses at the end. I wanted to get all the way to the last frame, which includes the squash after the contact. So I had the contact pose, but I wanted her to kind of squash down. You can kind of see how the feet slide forward just a little bit when she absorbs the weight. I also was having some trouble with where the screen was, like where the image is in the background. So I moved that around a little bit to try to give me better reference. Right? And you can see that I'm making changes to previous poses as well. So I want to get, this is the contact. I want to get the squash, or that the overlapping action. That's not the overlapping action. I guess it's the overshoot from the landing. So when she squashes down, so absorbing that weight. And then how I go to the end of it, I need her ending in that more confident pose. So I start creating the more confident pose in just a second here. And her transition into that. So the interesting thing is how she gets into that confident pose is she actually jumps up in the air just a little bit. And if you look at the kid's reference earlier, he does that skid forward and then it's just a tiny hop up in the air where his shoulders go high and then he slams his arms backwards in this like this gesture. So that's what I'm trying to get here, is trying to get her to that end gesture with that like pop up in the middle. And then my last pose that I get here for her, I make a moving hold that goes to the end of the animation. I really like the angry face at the end, actually. My plan for this overall, like, I want to make it look like she's fighting off something. So I think as she runs up the tree, some sort of small little robot something is going to be chasing her and crash into the tree. She'll do the flip over it and then just like end like she's still ready to fight. Right? I picked this. I think I mentioned this. I picked this because I love those young badass characters. Like there's a couple of different comics that have those. Like the Kick-Ass comics has Hit Girl in it, and like there's just something about that like personality of like a little girl who could kick everybody's butt is just a really cool character. Laura from X-23 is another character that kind of had that. So I really like that idea of her like being a little like tiny warrior. And so that's where some of this is coming from, and trying to get that in that like end pose is what I'm focusing on here. So I think we've gone through the whole thing. Yeah. Any questions? I feel like I'm.
When you open it up and you have the graph editor open, what were you doing? What if you set stuff to linear?
I'm setting it to stepped. So so if you right click, you can go to enable stepped preview, and that doesn't work on all rigs. So the reason is it depends on how it's rigged. So is it at the end of it that I do it? Yeah, right there. Yeah. So what's happening is when I'm setting these keyframes, it's setting some of them in auto key or auto tangent, and I'm going in there just selecting all of the keyframes and setting them to stepped mode, so I see them in that pose manner without any of the transitions. Now, if you right click on your timeline, a lot of rigs you can do enable stepped preview, and that will work. But if it has a lot of scripts or certain types of rigging mechanisms don't necessarily work with stepped preview. And so for her, I think what I was getting is like her eyelids would shut and like parts of her face would mess up. And I'm like, I'll just go in there and do it sort of the old-fashioned way. Enable step preview is just a one-button option that lets you go back and forth between the two. And if your rig lets you do that, that's cool, but I just kind of manually was doing it. So this is just finishing the blocking. The cool part about this, I'll tell you more about this tool here later, probably next class for you. But it's the tween machine, kind of lets you get some in-betweens, and we'll talk about that in the breakdown or the blocking plus lecture.
Is it Maya's? Does Maya have a version of it?
No, this is a free script you can download, tween machine. There's another tool that I would actually prefer to use, which is called Animbot. But Animbot's about $108 a year, and I just haven't gotten around to buying it. I will, because it's actually probably the best set of scripts I've ever seen. But it does the same thing, which allows you to sort of get a pose from 50% of one pose and another pose. So let me kind of go back and talk about what I'm creating here. I wanted to get a little bit more information about the run in. I was pretty sure that it was just going to be kind of a two bound, like she sort of bounds in and lands on her first pose. I wanted her to bound into the second pose and then up the tree. So really it's just going to be a two-step run. So I got her two passing poses. If I had a little bit more time, I'll probably go in and get the up poses too. I think I may have gotten some, actually I think I did get the up poses on this. So I think all I have is the up and the passing poses on that run in. And then I'm getting a little bit more of this pose here I thought was important. This is the pose like right after her feet leave the tree. So this is like where she pushes off the tree. I chose this one mainly because of where the arms and the head are. I personally can't do a front flip like this, but I have a feeling like he starts with his hands up in the air and then slings them forward with his upper body. And I think that that's where he's getting that as a centrifugal force, like that circular momentum that is going to carry his body all the way around in that flip. So it's really a jump up in the air that has that forward momentum of the twist in it. And I think those arms flinging forward were a big part of that. This is me, I think, actually improving some of the previous poses. So I got those poses, I got the contact poses, and I think if I have a little bit more time, I would probably go in and put maybe a little bit more information about the run in there. But overall, this was a big part of what I was trying to achieve. I'll show you the whole thing here in a few minutes. And this is me just, a little repetitive. This is me just watching it over and over again, sort of eyeballing things. Is this looking right? What can I make better? And it's little things, like I cleared up her silhouette on her hand just a little bit. Looking at it now, I do think I want to break her silhouette with her elbow a little bit more on some of these poses, just to get a clearer silhouette. Also leaned her in there a little bit more, so she's got a little bit more forward momentum toward the tree. And I'm doing a little bit of timing changing here as well. Now, I think it's interesting to, like, after I got that first few keyframes in, I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to why I'm choosing which keyframe to do next. It's really whichever one seems most interesting to me. By the end of this, I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think 12 keyframes. That's 12 accomplishments, right? Like, this is a very gratifying piece for me to be able to look back at and say, I did 12 things that I'm proud of in this project already, and it's not even out of blocking pose, right? That's why I'm showing you this, and that's why I'm telling you to trust the process, is because like you will need those little like cheer moments as you go, right? Like when you're working on a project that takes 40 hours to complete, like any opportunity you can take to celebrate an accomplishment will just keep your momentum or your what's that called? Your enthusiasm about the project going. So this is where I am right now. I'll show you the auto version first. Look at that, it's a mess. Like, that is the ugliest thing. That's where we start in the next part of this, right? Actually, that's really where we start in this splining, right? The thing about this, when I say Maya is a terrible in-betweener, this is what I'm talking about. This is why we have to go further than setting the keyframes, is because this is what Maya gives us. But in terms of my accomplishments, the things I'm happy about is this, I think, actually is communicating pretty clearly. I still see some opportunities for increasing, like, better timing. I think that there's some poses I can push a little bit more in this. One of the things that happens to me almost every time I work on a shot is I end the day being like, yes, that's a good piece. I'm happy with that. And then I go home and I sleep and I eat dinner and breakfast and everything, and come back the next day and look at it and I'm like, ugh, like, I could make that better, right? And it's because first thing in the morning or first time you open it up after having some downtime from it, you look at it with fresh eyes. Right? You are not carrying as much of that baggage as you were at the end of the day before. And so you're able to spot things that somebody else would have spotted the first time they watched it. So I do want to show you this. I know I've probably shown you this before. One of the things that will kind of help you spot some of those things. I'm using VLC, but if we go to Tools, Effects and Filters, under Video Effects, Geometry, this Transform, if I click that and set this to flip horizontally, I can now watch my mirrored animation. And this is like I did this at the beginning of last class, and I see things that I need to do differently. Like to me, I think her forward momentum on that flip isn't feeling exactly right. Feels like maybe she goes a little too far forward and then slows down in midair before coming down. And I also just see like, again, some of those run poses still feel like they could be a little stronger. I really want to accentuate this like last pose she goes into, but I think I'm going to do that with a breakdown. I think my key poses are okay, but I may push a few of those as well. And I do think that there's just some timing changes that I need to make on it. So, like, it's a constant process of improving it. The cool thing about this, though, is like what I would do. I used to do it on paper. You can do it however you want to now. I use Google Keep for a lot of stuff. Is do this. Come in first thing in the morning with a piece of paper beside you, watch it, and make notes of everything you think can be improved. And then you have a note, or then you have a to-do list for that day, right? You can go through and make those better. And whenever you're done with this, just you got to remember to uncheck this, or it will play your next video flipped as well. So this is where I'm at right now. This is where I'm going to continue from here. Some variation of this, or some like similar extent, is where it would be cool if you were at next class period, so we could kind of look at your blocking pass and give you feedback on this. Recognize that the feedback that you would give me to this, and I'm absolutely open to that, by the way. If you're seeing something I'm not seeing, I would love feedback on it. The feedback that you might give me on this is going to be feedback that I can implement now. The feedback that anyone would give me on this is, hey, it's all mushy and the flip's broken, right? And I'm like, I know that. Like, that's not helpful at all. And that's how your eyes see it too. All of the things that you're going to be seeing in this are all the things you haven't even touched yet, right? Not the things that you successfully did. So when we do our feedback, preferably in stepped mode, I could pause this at any point and say, oh, I see how I could maybe improve the silhouette of her face, or maybe get this ponytail out there a little bit more. Like different things that we could do to improve that. Maybe get her a little bit more negative space in between that arm. Like each of these, I don't know what's happening. There it goes. So like this pose, maybe I'll be like, oh, I could turn the hand a little to the side. All of these are feedback informations that I can go back and put into my workflow now, right? That will make it better down the road. So questions, comments, ideas? Okay, hopefully this is a little less painful than watching me animate for the 6 hours this took me. I think this is actually probably closer to 5 at this point, maybe 6, I don't know. Now, last class period, a couple of questions did come up. One of them, I want to point these characters out. Up in the resources folder, I put a couple of extra things. One of them we're going to be looking at later, the splining checklist. But the other thing is these game rigs. These are rigs that we use in Project 2. But if you're needing some body mechanics rigs, you're welcome to use any of these as well. So the game characters, I don't actually think I have renders of every one of them. They're from Autodesk Character Generator or something like that. So some simple rigs from that. There's a couple of male rigs as well. But the body mechanics rigs are sort of these generic mannequin rigs, right? So I'm using one of these to kind of explain, because somebody asked, how do you set a keyframe on every control? And if you notice from some of these videos, up there in the shelf, there's a Kayla shelf that has all of these different buttons to pick different parts of her character. So whenever I click this all button over here, it selects all of her controls, and then I can just hit S and it sets a keyframe on everything. You'll want to create that for your character as well. And depending on which rig you are using, that will either be easy or difficult. But I want to show you some tools that make it easier. Usually, when a person creates a rig, they realize an animator wants to do this, and so they create selection sets. So these little circles, icons, they're usually at the bottom of your outliner. These are like bookmarks for certain objects, right? It's basically like we selected a bunch of them and bookmarked those so we can find them all easily again. And a lot of times people will make one of these for their rig for all of the controls. So this guy has them, it's this A Tools Purple All. I'll explain that later if you want me to. But all of these are the keyable controls for this character. So I can select all of them like that. And now every control for this character is selected. Having said that, that was maybe still more clicks than I want. I would really like to be able to just click one button and select them. And that's actually what this button up here is. You'll see if I click that, it will select all of those controls. So I want to show you how to do that in case, I think I've shown all of you this in other classes, but sometimes you just need a reminder. If you go to the script editor, anything I do in Maya fires off well, not anything, but almost anything I do in Maya fires off a small script. So if I select this head control, you'll see it fires off select dash R head 1 control semicolon, right? That text right there is the text that I would type if I wanted to select the head. If I wanted to go down here to mail, paste that in and hit it, it selects the head control, right? So if I select all of these controls, the script that shows up in my script editor here is the script that I need to select all the controls. So I'll do edit, clear all, I'll choose the first one, hold shift, and choose the last one. And so those two lines will select all of these controls. So all I have to do is middle click and drag that to one of my shelves. I usually use the custom shelf, but you can create your own shelf if you want to, and drop that in there. It's a mail script, so I say mail. Now I have this new button. And when I click that button, what it does is it fires off that text again. It fires off that string of text. And so that's a quick one button way of grabbing that. You can also do it with like just the arm. You can make a button that just grabs the arm or just grabs the hands, right? A lot of people will try to just drag select the entire thing. And you'll notice that when I do that, it's not selecting everything. It's because there are priorities in how things are selected. And so dragging selecting is only going to select the things that are at the top of that priority list and visible. So currently my character's IK arms are invisible. So if I drag select, I can drag select all day long. They're not visible for me to select them, right? So this way is the way I can select everything on the character and have a button for it. If you want to make a little name for this button, you can right click and go to edit, and under shelves, I can give it an icon label, all, and give it a tooltip. Click me. There we go. Save all shelves, and now when you mouse over it, it says click me. So it's a really easy way of creating buttons. There are other tools that make selection sets as well, but I would again strongly recommend you do this, because now all I gotta do if I need to set a keyframe on the entire pose, click that button and hit S. And everything has a keyframe on it now. I also personally work in auto key, but that's me. You do you, like whatever works for you. Questions, comments? Anything? Okay. All right. Well, I think I probably only have about 150 more words left in me for the rest of the day, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of end it there. The rest of the class is yours to kind of do whatever you want to. I'll be around till the end of class, and I'll be really curious to see what you're working on, or if you need any feedback or have any questions. I'd love to chime in. Yeah. All right. It's all yours.